Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Cole Phillips, author of The Adventure of the Twisted Truths and host of the Book and Dagger. Today we are continuing our read-along of The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. We will be reading Chapter 18, The Return Journey. So basically, if you remember the last chapter, Bilbo got hit on the head by a stone and was knocked unconscious just as the eagle came swooping down. And when he wakes up, he was literally by himself. He's lying on the flat stones of Ravenhill, and no one was near. A cloudless day, but cold, was broad above him. He was shaking and as chilled as stone, but his head burned with fire. Now I wonder what has happened, he said to himself. At any rate, I am not yet one of the fallen heroes, but I suppose there is still time enough for that. And he sits up, and he rubs his eyes, and he sees a camp still in the plain some distance off. There's coming and going about the gate of the mountain. Dwarves seemed to be busy removing the wall, but all was deadly still. There was no call and no echo of a song. Sorrow seemed to be in the air. Victory after all, I suppose, he said, feeling his aching head. Well, it seems a very gloomy business. Suddenly he was aware of a man climbing up and coming towards him. Hello there, he called with a shaky voice. Hello there, what news? What voice is that speaks among the stones? The man, halting and peering about him not far from where Bilbo sat. Bilbo then remembered his ring. Well, I'm blessed, said he. The invisibility has its drawbacks after all. Otherwise, I suppose I might have spent a warm and comfortable night in bed. It's me, Bilbo Baggins, companion of Thorin, he cried, hurriedly taking out the ring. Anyway, the man rushes forward and says, It is well that I have found you. You are needed, and we have looked for you long. You would have been numbered among the dead, who are many, if Gandalf the wizard had not said that your voice was last heard from this place. I have been sent to look here for the last time. Are you much hurt? A nasty knock on the head, I think, said Bilbo, but I have a helm and a hard skull. All the same, I feel sick, and my legs are like straws. The man says he will carry Bilbo down to the camp, so he hoists Bilbo up, and since he's swift and sure-footed, it was not long before Bilbo was set down before a tent in Dale, and there stood Gandalf with his arm in a sling. Even the wizard had not escaped without a wound, and there were few unharmed in all the host. And when Gandalf saw Bilbo, he was delighted. Baggins, he exclaimed. Well, I never. Alive after all. I am glad. I began to wonder if even your luck would see you through. A terrible business, and it nearly was disastrous. But other news can wait. Come, he said more gravely. You are called for. And leading the hobbit, he took him within the tent. Hail, Thorin, he said as he entered. I have brought him. There indeed lay Thorin Oakenshield, wounded with many wounds, and his rent armor and notched axe were cast upon the floor. He looked up as Bilbo came beside him. Farewell, good thief, he said. I go now to the halls of waiting to sit beside my fathers until the world is renewed. Since I leave now all gold and silver and go where it is of little worth, I wish to part in friendship from you, and I would take back my words and deeds at the gate. Bilbo knelt on one knee, filled with sorrow. Farewell, King of the Mountain, he said. This is a bitter adventure, if it must end so, and not a mountain of gold can amend it. Yet I am glad to have shared in your perils. That is more than any Baggins deserves. No, said Thorin, there is more in you of good than you know, child of the kindly West. Some courage and some wisdom, blended in measure. If more of us valued food and cheer and song above hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world. But sad or merry, I must leave it now. Farewell. Then Bilbo turned away, and he went by himself and sat alone, wrapped in a blanket. And whether you believe it or not, he wept until his eyes were red and his voice was hoarse. He was a kindly little soul. Indeed, it was long before he had the heart to make a joke again. A mercy it is, he said at last to himself, that I woke up when I did. I wish Thorin were living, but I am glad that we parted in kindness. You are a fool, Bilbo Baggins. You made a great mess of that business with the stone. There was a battle in spite of all your efforts to buy peace and quiet, but I suppose you can hardly be blamed for that. Basically, Bilbo learned basically all that had happened after he had been hit by the stone. But it gave him more sorrow than joy, and he was aching his bones for the homeward journey. That would, however, be a little delayed, so Tolkien says, in the meantime, he will tell you the rest of the battle that we never got to see. But anyway, the Eagles had long had suspicions of the goblins mustering. From their watchfulness, the movements in the mountains could not be altogether hid. So they, too, had gathered in great numbers under the great eagle of the misty mountains. And at length, smelling battle from afar, they had come speeding down the gale in the nick of time. They it was who dislodged the goblins from the mountain slopes, casting them over precipices, or driving them shrieking and bewildered among their foes. It was not long before they had freed the lowly mountain, and elves and men on either side of the valley could come at last to the help of the battle below. But even with the eagles, they were still outnumbered. In that last hour, Beorn himself had appeared. No one knew how or from where. He came alone, and in bear's shape, and he seemed to have grown almost to giant size in his wrath. The roar of his voice was like drums and guns, and he tossed wolves and goblins from his path like straws and feathers. He fell upon their rear and broke like a clap of thunder through the ring. The dwarves were making a stand still about their lords upon a low rounded hill. Then Beorn stooped and lifted Thorin, who had fallen pierced with spears, and bore him out of the fray. Swiftly he returned, and his wrath was redoubled, so that nothing could withstand him, and no weapon seemed to bite upon him. He scattered the bodyguard and pulled down Bolg himself and crushed him. Then dismay fell on the goblins. They fled in all directions, but weariness left their enemies with the coming of new hope, and they pursued them closely, and prevented most of them from escaping where they could. They drove many of them into the running river, and such as fled south or west they hunted in the marshes about the forest river, and there the greater part of the last fugitives perished, while those that came hardly to the wood elves' realm there were slain or drawn in to die deep in the trackless dark of Mirkwood. Songs have said that 3 parts of the goblin warriors of the north perished on that day, and the mountains had peace for many a year. Victory had been assured before the fall of night, but the pursuit was still on foot when Bilbo returned to the camp, and not many were in the valley save the more grievously wounded. "Where are the eagles?" he asked Gandalf that evening, as he lay wrapped in many warm blankets. "Some are in the hunt," said the wizard, "but most have gone back to their eyries. They would not stay here, and departed with the first light of morning. Dane has crowned their chief with gold, and sworn friendship with them forever." And when Bilbo says, "I'm sorry, I would like to see them again. Perhaps I shall see them on the way home. I suppose I will be going home soon?" "As soon as you like," said the wizard. But actually, it's several days before Bilbo can go, because they bury Thorin beneath the mountain, and Bard actually lays the Arkenstone on Thorin's breast as he is buried. He says, "There let it lie till the mountain falls. May it bring good fortune to all his folk that dwell here after." And then the Elven King actually takes Orcus, which they took from Thorin when he was captured, and he lays Orcus upon the tomb. And it is said that in songs that gleamed ever in the dark if foes approach, and the fortress of the dwarves could not be taken by surprise. Then, because Fili and Kili, who are Thorin's nephews, because they also fell in the battle, there's really no heir to the throne of the King of the Mountain. So now Dane, son of Nain, takes up his abode in the mountain, becomes king under the mountain. And the other dwarves decide that they're going to stay in the mountain with Dane. And then they divide up the gold amongst each other, to Dwalin and Nori and Ori and Dorian, Oin and Gloin, and Bifur and Bofur and Bombur, and to Bilbo. But a 14th share of all the silver and gold, wrought and unwrought, was given up to Bard, for Dane said, "We will honor the agreement of the dead," and he now has the Arkenstone in his keeping. Even a 14th share was wealth exceedingly greater than that of many mortal kings. From that treasure Bard sent much gold to the master of Laketown, and he rewarded his followers and friends freely. To the Elven King he gave the emeralds of Girion, such jewels as he most loved, which Dane had restored to him. To Bilbo he said, "This treasure is as much yours as it is mine, though old agreements cannot stand, since so many had a claim in its winning and defense. Yet even though you are willing to lay aside all your claim, I should wish that the words of Thorin, of which you repented, should not prove true, that we should give you little. I would reward you most richly of all." "Very kind of you," said Bilbo, "but really it is a relief to me. How on earth should I have got all that treasure home without war and murder all along the way? I don't know. And I don't know what I should have done with it when I got home. I'm sure it is better in your hands." In the end, he takes 2 small chests, one filled with silver and the other with gold, such as one strong pony can manage. And then it's time for him to say goodbye to all the dwarves. So he says, "Farewell, Balin, and farewell, Dwalin, and farewell, Dori, Nori, Ori, Oin, Gloin, Bifur, Bofur, and Bombur. May your beards never grow thin." And turning to the mountain, he adds, "Farewell, Thorin, Oakenshield, and Fili and Kili. May your memory never fade." The dwarves bow low, but they are getting emotional because they're going to miss Bilbo. So Bilbo says goodbye and good luck wherever you fare. Or Balin says goodbye and good luck wherever you fare. "If ever you visit us again, when our halls are made fair once more, then the feast shall indeed be splendid. If you are ever passing my way," said Bilbo, "don't wait to knock. Tea is at 4, but any of you are welcome any time." Then the elf host is also leaving. They're going back to the woods. And so Bilbo was riding with them and with Gandalf and Beorn. And because Beorn's going back to his home, which is that way. And eventually, as they get to the part where Gandalf and Beorn and Bilbo are going to leave, and the elven host is going to go back to their place, Gandalf says, "Farewell, O Elven King. Merry be the greenwood while the world is yet young, and merry be all your folk." "Farewell, O Gandalf," said the king. "May you ever appear when you are most needed and least expected. The oftener you appear in my halls, the better shall I be pleased." "I beg of you," said Bilbo, stammering and standing on one foot, "to accept this gift." And he brought out a necklace of silver and pearls that Dane had given him at their parting. "In what way have I earned such a gift, O Hobbit?" said the king. "Well, I thought, don't you know," said Bilbo, rather confused, "that some little return should be made for your hospitality. I mean, even a burglar has his feelings. I have drunk much of your wine and eaten much of your bread." "I will take your gift, O Bilbo the Magnificent," said the king gravely, "and I name you elf, friend, and blessed. May your shadow never grow less, or stealing would be too easy. Farewell." Then Bilbo goes, he stays with Beorn in his house for a little bit. because it's Yuletide and it's warm and merry, and men all around the forest, woodmen around that area, they come and feast Beorn's table because he actually invites them there, which is a big change for Beorn because if you remember, Beorn did not like having people. Now he's inviting guests, and they're coming because the goblins and the wolves are almost all dead. And Beorn actually becomes a great chief afterward in those regions and ruled a wide land between the mountains and the wood. And it's said that for many generations, the men of his line had the power of taking bear shape. And some were grim men and bad, but most were in heart like Beorn, if less in size and strength. In their days, the last goblins were hunted from the misty mountains, and a new peace came over the edge of the wild. Anyway, Bilbo is hold on. Yeah, it was spring and a fair, and then eventually Bilbo actually stays there for longer. It's spring and a fair one with mild weathers and a bright sun before Bilbo and Gandalf took their leave at last of Beorn. And though he longed for home, Bilbo left with regret, for the flowers of the gardens of Beorn were in springtime no less marvelous than in high summer. And at last they reached the long road and reached the pass where the goblins had captured them before, but they had come to that high point at morning. And looking backwards, they saw a white sun shining over the outstretched lands. There behind lay Mirkwood, blue in the distance and darkly green at the nearer edge even in the spring. There, far away, was the lonely mountain on the edge of eyesight. On its highest peak, snow yet unmelted was gleaming pale. So comes snow after fire, and even dragons have their ending, said Bilbo, and he turned his back on his adventure. The Tookish part was getting very tired, and the Baggins was daily getting stronger. I wish now only to be in my armchair, he said. That is the end of chapter 18. We'll be back with chapter 19 coming soon.